Lost on an alien world, the stars blurred into streaks of light as Zor's ship hurtled through the cosmos. Alarms blared, warning of the imminent system's failure. She frantically worked the controls, desperately trying to stabilize the craft, but it was no use. The ship shuddered violently, and Zora was thrown from her seat as it began its uncontrolled descent towards the unknown planet below. The impact was jarring, knocking the breath from Zora's LS. The ship groaned and creaked around her, the once sleek hull now twisted and broken. Smoke filled the cabin, acrid and thick. Zora coughed, her eyes watering as she struggled to unbuckle herself from the safety harness. Every movement sent pain lancing through her body, but she gritted her teeth and pushed forward. She had to get out, had to assess the damage and figure out where in the universe she landed. Zora stumbled from the wreckage, her legs unsteady beneath her. The landscape before her was unlike anything she'd ever seen. Towering trees with green leaves, a carpet of soft grass, and a sky that shimmered a brilliant blue. It was beautiful, but utterly foreign. Fear gripped her heart as the realization set in. She was stranded on an alien world, light years from home, with no way to call for help. As the suns began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Zora's situation grew dire. Her injuries throbbed with every step, and a chill crept into the air. She needed shelter, needed to tend to her wounds. But this world was a mystery to her. What creatures called it home? Were they hostile with the very environment itself? Reject her alien biology. Zora pressed on, limping through the undergrowth as the light faded. Each rustle of leaves, each snapping twig set her heart racing. She was vulnerable, exposed, utterly alone on a planet she didn't understand. Just as despair began to overtake her, Zora spotted a flicker of light in the distance, a fire, a house. Whatever it was a sign of civilization, of potential help summoning the last of her strength. Zora dragged herself towards the light. As she broke through the tree line, she saw a small cabin nestled in a clearing. Smoke curled red from the chimney and warm lights spilled from the windows. It was a beacon of hope in the gathering darkness. Zora staggered to the door, her vision blurring at the edges. She raised a shaking hand to knock, but her body had reached its limit as her knuckles brushed the weathered wood. Zora's legs gave out. She collapsed, consciousness fading even as the door swung open and a figure loomed over her. "Please, Zora," whispered her voice, cracking with desperation. "Help me." And then the darkness claimed her, nursing Zora back to health. Zora awoke to the crackling of a fire and the soft rustling of movement nearby. She blinked, her vision slowly clearing as she took in her surroundings. She was lying in a bed, tucked beneath a warm quilt. Bandages wrapped her wounds, and the pain that had once consumed her had dulled to a manageable ache. "You're awake." The voice was gentle, tinged with relief. Zora turned her head to see a human man sitting in a chair beside the bed. He had kind eyes and a warm smile, his face lined with concern. "Where am I?" Zara asked, her voice rough from disuse. "You're safe," the man assured her. "I'm Ethan. I found you collapsed outside my cabin 2 days ago. You were hurt pretty badly." Zara struggled to sit up, wincing as her body protested the movement. Ethan was at her side in an instant, his hands gentle as he helped her settle back against the pillows. "Easy," he soothed. "You need to rest. Your body's been through a lot." As the days passed, Ethan tended to Zara with a dedication that astounded her. He changed her bandages, brought her nourishing food and warm drinks, and sat with her for hours, telling stories of Earth and its wonders. Zara found herself captivated by this human, so different from anyone she had known on her war-torn home world. Their compassion was seen as weakness, kindness as a liability, but Ethan's gentle strength, his selfless care for a stranger, spoke to a depth of character that Zara had never encountered. As her body healed, Zara shared stories of her own. She spoke of the endless expanse of the cosmos, of the countless worlds she had visited in her travels. Ethan listened with rapt attention, his eyes wide with wonder. A bond began to form between them, a connection that transcended the vastness of space and the differences in their species. Ethan taught Zora about Earth, its history, its cultures, its breathtaking beauty. In return, Zara shared the knowledge of the stars, of the technologies and marvels that lay beyond Earth's reach. In the quiet moments as the fire burned low and the night pressed in around the cabin, Zee found herself studying Ethan's face, tracing the lines of kindness around his eyes, the gentle curve of his smile. A warmth ballooned in her chest, a feeling she couldn't quite name but knew was precious beyond measure as her strength returned. Zara knew she faced a choice. She could repair her ship, leave Earth behind and return to the life she had known, or she could stay, embrace this new world and the human who had shown her such compassion. Looking at Ethan, seeing the hope and affection in his eyes, Zora knew there was no choice at all. This was where she belonged. At the sight of the man who had saved her life and captured her heart, she reached out, taking Ethan's hand in her own. "I'm staying," she said softly, "for you, for this, for us." And in the warmth of Ethan's smile, in the gentle strength of his embrace, Zara knew she had finally found home. Zara's vow and hidden powers emerged in the days that followed. Zara found herself constantly amazed by Ethan's kindness. He had taken her in, a stranger from the stars, and cared for her with a selflessness she had never known. As her strength returned, Zora vowed to repay that kindness in any way she could. She started small, helping with chores around the cabin. She mended torn clothes, chopped firewood, and tended to the small garden behind the house. Ethan protested, at first insisting that she needed to rest, but Zara was determined. This was the least she could do for the man who had saved her life. As they worked side by side, Zara began to notice things about Ethan: the way his eyes would sometimes drift to the horizon, a sadness in their depths, the way he would pause in the middle of a task, lost in thought. She wondered about his past, about the pain he seemed to carry with him. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Zora finally found the courage to ask Ethan. She said softly, "Why do you live out here, all alone? Don't you have family, friends?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment, staring into the dancing flames. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with emotion. "I did once, but my wife, she passed away, cancer. After that, I couldn't stay in the city too. Many memories, so I came out here to start over." Zara's heart ached for him. She reached out, placing her hand over his. "I'm so sorry, Ian. I had no idea." He looked at her then, and the depth of pain in his eyes took her breath away. "You're the first person I've told that to in a long time," he said softly. In that moment, Zara made a decision. She would do whatever it took to bring joy back into Ethan's life. She would be the companion he needed, the friend who would stand by his side through any storm, and she knew just how to start. The next morning, as Ethan stepped outside, he found Zora in the garden, but instead of tending to the plants with tools, she was glowing. A soft, shimmering light emanated from her skin, enveloping the garden in a warm radiance. As Ethan watched, stunned, the plants began to grow. Flowers bloomed, their peeds unfurling in a riot of color. Vegetables ripened on the vine, their fruits swelling to perfection in mere moments. The once modest garden had transformed into a lush oasis, bursting with life. Zara turned to Ethan, a smile on her face. "On my world," she explained, "we have abilities that allow us to connect with living things, to encourage growth and healing. I wanted to share that with you." Ethan was speechless. He stepped into the garden, marveling at the beauty around him. "Zara, this is incredible. I've never seen anything like it." She took his hand, her skin still glowing softly. "This is just the beginning," she promised. "I want to use my gifts to help you to make your life here better in any way I can." And as Ethan looked at her, seeing the love and determination in her eyes, he felt something stir in his heart, a warmth, a hope that he thought had been lost forever in the alien girl who had fallen from the stars. Ethan had found not just a friend, but a second chance at happiness, and he knew without a doubt but he would cherish that gift for the rest of his days. Ethan's tragic past and Zora's promise. As the days turned into weeks, Zora and Ethan fell into a comfortable rhythm. They worked together, tending to the cabin and the land around it. Zora used her powers to help in subtle ways, encouraging plants to grow, easing the aches in Ethan's body after a long day's work, filling the air with a gentle, soothing energy. But even as their bond deepened, Zora could sense a sadness In Ethan, a weight he carried that never quite lifted, she longed to know more, to understand the pain that haunted him. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over the hills, Ethan finally opened up. "Her name was Lai," he said softly, his eyes distant. "We met in college, fell in love fast and hard. We got married right after graduation, started planning our life together." Zara listened, her heart aching for him. "We wanted kids, a big family. But then Lily got sick, cancer. It happened so fast. One day she was fine, and the next his voice broke, and Zara reached out, taking his hand in hers. "I'm so sorry, Ethan," she whispered. He squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her touch. "I couldn't save her," he said, his voice raw with pain. "All our plans, all our dreams, they died with her after the funeral. I couldn't stay in the city, too many memories, so I came out here to try and start over." Zara felt tears welling in her eyes. She couldn't imagine the depth of Ethan's loss, the pain he had endured in that moment. She made a promise to herself she would do whatever it took to bring happiness back into his life. "Ethan," she said softly, "I know I can't replace what you've lost, but I'm here for you always. I'll be your friend, your family. I'll help you carry this weight." He looked at her, then his eyes glistening with tears. "Zara, I don't know what to say having you here. It's meant more than you could ever know." She smiled, squeezing his hand. "You saved me, Ethan. You took me and cared for me when I had nothing. Let me do the thing for you." In that moment, under the fading light of the setting sun, something shifted between them. The bond that had been growing, the connection that had been sparking, solidified into something unbreakable. Zara knew with a certainty that resonated in her very soul that she would spend the rest of her life at Ethan's side. She would use her powers, her knowledge, her very being to bring joy and light back into his world. "I promise you, Ethan," she said, her voice fierce with determination, "I will always be here, through good times and bad, through laughter and tears. You'll never be alone again." And as Ethan pulled her into his arms, holding her close, as the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, Zara knew that she had finally found her true purpose, not in the stars, not in the endless expanse of the cosmos, but here, in the heart of the man she loved. An idyllic life, threatened life, settled into a peaceful rhythm for Zara and Ethan. Their days were filled with simple joys, working side by side, sharing meals, taking long walks through the woods. In the evenings they would sit together, Ethan teaching Zara about Earth's customs and traditions, Zara regaling him with tales of her adventures across the stars. Zara's powers brought a new vibrancy to their world. The cabin, once weathered and worn, now seemed to glow with an inner light. The garden flourished, producing bountiful harvests that they shared with neighbors in the nearby town. Even Ethan himself seemed transformed, the lines of grief on his face softening, replaced by a quiet contentment. But even as they basted in their newfound happiness, a threat was brewing on the horizon. In the nearby town, whispers began to circulate. Strangers had been seen in the woods, men with cold eyes and high-tech equipment. They asked questions, showed grainy photos of a crash site, demanded information about any unusual sightings. At first, Ethan and Zara paid little heed to the rumors. They were lost in their own world, too wrapped up in each other to notice the growing unease in the town. But then one night, everything changed. Zara awoke to the sound of engines, the harsh glare of searchlights cutting through the darkness. She bolted upright, her heart pounding in her chest. "Ethan," she cried, shaking him awake. "Something's wrong." He was on his feet in an instant, peering out the window. What he saw made his blood run cold. Vehicles were approaching, the cabin, black SUVs with tinted windows. Men poured out, armed with weapons Ethan had never seen before. They moved with military precision, surrounding the house. "Zara, stay back," Ethan moaned, pushing her behind him. But Zara wasn't about to hide. She stepped forward, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice ringing with authority. "What do you want?" One of the men stepped forward, a cruel smile on his face. "We're the Alien Containment Task Force," he said. "And you, little lady, are coming with us." Ethan's heart dropped. He knew with sudden, terrifying clarity that these men were here for Zara. They knew what she was, and they would stop at nothing to take her. He grabbed Zora's hand, pulling her close. "I won't let them take you," he whispered fiercely. "I swear it." But as he looked out at the assembled forces, at the weapons trained On the cabin, Ethan felt a sinking. Despair, how could he possibly protect? Zara, against this, the leader of the group, stepped forward, his voice called. "You have one chance," he said. "Hand over the alien, and no one gets hurt. Resist. And we'll take her by force." Ethan's grip on Zora's hand tightened. He looked down at her, saw the fear in her eyes, the determination in that moment. He knew he would fight to his last breath to keep her safe. "You'll have to go through me," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the terror coursing through him. And as the men advanced on the cabin, weapons at the ready, Ethan and Sarah stood side by side, ready to face whatever came next. Zara's sacrifice and Ethan's stand. The alien containment task force closed in, their weapons trained on the cabin. Ethan and Zara stood firm, hand in hand, determined to face this threat together. "Zara, you have to run," Ethan urged, his voice low and desperate. "I'll hold them off, give you a chance to escape." But Zara shook her head, her eyes glowing with resolve. "No, Ethan, I'm not leaving you. We face this together." She stepped forward, her body beginning to emit a soft pulsing light. The task force agents faltered, unnerved by the display of power. "Leave us alone," Zara commanded, her voice resonating with an otherworldly authority. "We want no trouble," the leader of the group sneered. "I'm impressed. You have no idea what you're dealing with, girl. We've been hunting your kind for years. You're coming with us, whether you like it or not." He raised his weapon, aiming squarely at Zora's chest. Ethan moved without thinking, throwing himself in front of her. Just as the agent fired, the blast hit Ethan square in the chest, sending him flying backwards. He hit the ground hard, his body convulsing with pain. Zora screamed, dropping to her knees beside him. She cradled his head in her lap, tears streaming down her face. Ethan looked up at her, his vision blurring. "Zara," he whispered, his voice weak, "I love you." Zara's heart shattered. She looked up at the task force, her grief transforming into a blinding rage. "You will pay for this," she snarled, her body beginning to glow with a fierce, blinding light. She rose to her feet, energy crackling around her like a living thing. The task force agent stumbled back, their eyes wide with fear. Zara raised her hands, and a wave of pure force exploded outwards. The agents were sent flying, their weapons disintegrating in their hands. Vehicles were overturned, equipment shattered in a matter of moments. The once formidable task force lay broken and defeated, scattered across the clearings. Zara turned back to Ethan, the light fading from her body. She knelt beside him, pulling him into her arms. "Ethan, stay with me," she pleaded, her tears falling on his face. "I can't lose you." Ethan smiled up at her, his hand reaching up to caress her cheek. "You'll never lose me," he whispered. "I'm a part of you now, forever." Zara held him close, pouring all of her love, all of her energy into him. She willed him to heal, to come back to her, and slowly, miraculously, Ethan's wounds began to close. The color returned to his face, his breathing steadied. Zara wept with relief, holding him tightly as he sat up, dazed. "But alive, you saved me," Ethan said, wonder in his voice. "Zara, you saved me." She smiled through her tears, resting her forehead against his. "We saved each other," she whispered. In the aftermath of the battle, as the sun began to rise over the horizon, Zara and Ethan stood together, looking out over the land that had become their home. They knew that challenges still lay ahead. The world was a vast and complicated place, and their love was a light in the darkness. But as they held each other, basking in the warmth of the rising sun, they knew that they could face anything as long as they had each other. Zora looked up at the sky, at the stars that had once been her only home. She thought of the journey that had brought her here, to this moment, to this man, and she knew with a certainty that filled her very being that she was exactly where she was meant to be.